I'm Elliot Felix. I'm the founder of Brightspot, and I'm also the author of a book on student success called How to Get the Most Out of College. And I'm joined by my colleague, Abigail in Connecticut, and our client, Mike, in Philadelphia. I'm going to turn my mic on now. That's very exciting. My mic is now on. Yes, you can hear the difference. That's very exciting as well. And we're excited to talk about really how you understand your current state, how you imagine a future state, and how you do that gap analysis between current and future to figure out what you need to change, reorganize, add, subtract to get there. And it's really about the future of engineering, education, and research, and thinking about the role that space can play in that. We have a great session today where we're going to do some introductions, do a quick poll to get a sense of what's on your mind. Then we'll go through the kind of the internal context for Penn engineering, the external landscape and how that's changing, give you all a chance to reflect, discuss. We'll talk about some of the solutions we came up with together for those challenges, and then have a chance to reflect and discuss on that, and we'll take questions. So just to get a sense of what's on your mind, let's do this quick poll. You can point your camera here, or you can just type in, if you like typing, pollev.com/Brightspot. And we're interested to see what you think are the 3 biggest changes facing engineering education research. Is it AI and automation? Is it about the biotech boom? Is it climate crisis? Is it working across disciplines? Is it new ways of teaching and learning? Is it hybrid and remote work? And it looks like AI and automation is off to an early lead. Collaboration across disciplines, industry partnerships. Collaboration across disciplines just overtook it to first place here. So it seems like people really think that the things that are the disruptors, the things that are changing how we do research and how students learn in engineering, and maybe STEM more broadly, is about working across disciplines, incorporating AI and automation, and maybe a mix of these other things: partnerships, new ways of learning and working, demographic headwinds, keep enrollment going. So with those changes in mind, let's hear what the changes, the context was for Penn engineering. So that gave us the internal and the external view of the challenges, the context, the changes. And what we want to do is hear what you're seeing on your campus or in your work about what's changing. So we have a second poll. So we have funding, finance, similar themes. And these are the facility planning challenges you're thinking about: lack of space, managing space, shifting culture. Outdated infrastructure. Everyone says they need more space, but when you walk around the campus, it's empty. That's interesting. I see a lot of people that's resonating with a lot of folks here. New governance models, not enough space to grow or change. Who has the outdated infrastructure? Anybody want to speak to outdated infrastructure?
So we have a number of buildings from 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. All of those really have they plan labs in different ways. So our ventilation is now runs through lab ventilation, so as soon as we come back in, our lab in those spaces, we have ventilation and not enough space in there. And then they're just they're the old cinder block walls, very closed, very no student spaces.
Right, so small spaces, lack of student spaces, outdated infrastructure where it's not set up for the air changes or what you need when you turn something into a lab.
Or into just a modern lab.
Or a modern lab, yeah. I'm repeating the question per the instructions for posterity, so I'm not just echoing for echo's sake. I'm doing my best to distill. We've got time for a couple, let's see. I feel like funding is obvious. So who wants to talk about shifting culture? That got a couple of votes. And then after that, we'll move on. Abigail maybe planted some seeds for that. Anybody trying to shift culture? Yeah. It was still great. Your answer was still great. Yeah.
But as an architect, what we see, a lot of this, and this goes directly to some of the interdisciplinary working with different PIs, more open labs, sharing space, things like that. Just the issues with developing that dialogue and bringing people along. You always have some holdouts who are want to stay in their old outdated space, and
right.
Just working through that with PIs because really buildings for them work, negotiating that at all levels of the.
So new space allocation models and configurations, more shared, more flexible, means people have to kind of change the culture around space. Well, that's great. So we've talked a lot about the changes, the challenges, the context, probably some other C words, and campuses, throw that in, curriculum, culture. And now let's talk a little bit about the future. And for Penn Engineering, it was really imagining a future where space could be studios that help accelerate design and discovery and forge and foster partnerships across disciplines with industry, and do it in a way that's really building on a great student experience, a history of supporting diversity, equity, and inclusion, and doing it in an accessible way. And so the vision is like the why, and the goals are like the what, right? So we're trying to think long term. We're thinking 15 years out, and we're imagining what we need to do. And that's really about supporting those collaborations with the School of Medicine, with arts and sciences, about facilities that are more porous for those other disciplines and for industry partners, about enhancing the student experience, thinking really carefully about the pipeline into the programs, but also out of the programs in terms of career placement, and understanding that the reality that students are going to be working in a hybrid way. They're going to be working remotely. Their education should prepare them for that. So if the vision is the why and the goals are the what, the principles are the how, right? Creating things that are more porous, enabling those collaborations, prioritizing physical space where it's going to support hands-on learning, tinkering, making, fabrication, and community. Really seeing Penn Engineering as a driving force in the biotech boom happening in Philadelphia, accelerating the translational research, so things come out of the lab and into the world. And so with that vision, those goals, those principles in mind, then we had to quantify this. And a lot of people make what we think is a huge mistake in doing this, which is they go from the current to the future. And the thing that does is it muddles your forecast because you've got growth mixed in with correcting current deficiencies. So what we do is you take the current and then you right size the current. And that right sizing, you want to look internally. What are people saying about they have too much of, too little of, what's working, what isn't? And then you look externally at the benchmarks and you bring those together. Then you scale up for growth, because then you can differentiate of these changes, how much of this is due to growth in faculty, research, grants, enrollment, and how much of it is just fixing what we've got or right sizing what we've got for tomorrow. So when we looked at the benchmarks, Penn Engineering was about 100 net square feet per student, whereas the 8 folks in the peer set were about 140. So over 50, and we're not just kind of keeping up with the Joneses. We're not just kind of like chasing a number. let's have what our peers have. We're thinking about this thoughtfully. And all that thinking results in about 280,000 net square feet growth forecasted over the next 15 years. But you have to organize and reorganize those spaces where you have surpluses, where you have deficits. So we came up with 4 big ideas. One of those big ideas is about centralizing teaching and learning to create that critical mass of classrooms, study, community space, coffee, along a social spine where students can see and be seen, where they can have contact with each other, with faculty, and where you can create a lot of efficiency in terms of time and space. Kind of like Carnegie Mellon's business school, where there's a whole series of classrooms and study spaces and student services to create that kind of mixing, to create that social spine. And if the idea around teaching and learning was about centralizing where possible, research was kind of the opposite. It was sort of accepting, okay, we have to distribute, we have to co-locate with our partners in the School of Medicine and Arts and Sciences. We have to meet researchers where they are, and we have to think about this ecosystem, this network that Abigail talked about, right, where you have your home base, and then you have other spaces like innovation hubs and a center of centers. And so that's really building on the upcoming Vagelos lab that Mike mentioned, but finding ways to distribute, to co-locate with partners to fuel that collaboration. But it's not all about co-location, right? Because you can complement, and some things can be shared. You can create that shared infrastructure. You can create that center of centers, those transdisciplinary facilities where you have shared equipment. It might be about measurement, for instance. It might be about fabrication. It might be about sensing, like the Center for Planetary Health at ASU. And that's really complementing the home base. It's bringing people together. It's research project rooms that are maybe assigned on a more flexible basis as opposed to kind of forever, which sometimes is the default. And then the 4th big idea was really thinking about how, if you remember that goal about student experience, that was pretty diffuse. And there's really an opportunity to repurpose some space to create a new student services hub, and really more than student services, a student life hub, where you have a variety of services, everything from CAPS, psychological counseling, health and wellness programming, student clubs and organizations, study space, and really create a sort of a center of gravity for student life with some of those social components, because all education is social, and there's about 25,000 square feet projected for that. Now we want to hear. We just heard a whole variety of solutions: how to right size and do the forecast, how to envision the future, how to centralize teaching, how to distribute research, how to create a center of centers, how to create a student hub. What are you thinking about at your university or your campus and your work as far as solutions to some of these challenges? So you can type in some ideas, you can upvote and downvote. Maybe you've got some of the things in common with what we just talked about. Maybe you've got some other solutions. So centralized student collaboration spaces, open flexible office plans. It's almost 2 in 1 there, and that's great. Centralizing the first-year engineering experience, opening a new interdisciplinary building, theme-based research instead of departments, dedicated student project spaces, great ideas. So a lot of people looking at centralizing student collaboration and organizing research by theme. So I want to give folks a chance to discuss this. So what we'll do, turn to your neighbor and introduce yourself if you want, and just have a quick chat about what are you seeing at your institution or in your work relative to these solution ideas. And we'll take about 4 or 5 minutes, and then we'll share. They're already started, so let's dive in. Yeah. All right, let's have a couple folks share a quick recap of what they talked about. Who wants to share the solutions they're thinking about on their campus or in their work?
We're building new buildings.
Building new buildings. Okay. What kind?
The easiest, but
What kind? Great ones.
well, yeah. So I'm from Yale, so we
Mhm.
will have a large physical and engineering science building going up, but
Okay.
it's maybe like 7-8 years down the road.
Wow. Okay.
But it has its challenges because we don't have just extra space where we can just plop a building.
Okay.
And then it's bringing together a lot of people from different departments, which I know has been a theme, and with a lot of very specific instrumentation. And so we're already discussing.
Awesome. So a new building at Yale that's going to bring together different disciplines and departments, specialized equipment, maybe some challenges citing it, and thinking about it by theme. Great. Who else would like?
So I just,
Yeah.
I just talked
Your counterpart.
So
All right.
At Ohio State, we're about to open a new interdisciplinary research. It's funny, our architect is from New Haven.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. So, so it's a lot of anxiety because we're about to open. There's going to be 100 PI coming to this big building.
Wow.
14 wet lab neighborhoods, 4 dry computational.
Okay.
I've met a lot of researchers on tours. So we're going to put them all together, and
Mixing bowl.
it's assigned by bench, how many allotted bench space you get.
Mm-hmm.
And they got, a lot of comments from people coming through. Who am I going to be working with? I don't have this in my lab, but by the time they get through on a tour, like, yeah, okay, this will work.
That's great.
Nice.
That's great. So it sounds like the tour is a key part of the change management
It
strategy.
helps. It helps
Yeah.
a lot.
And we're talking about a shared lab, 100 PIs, Ohio State, 14 wet neighborhoods, 3 dry neighborhoods, 4 dry neighborhoods, sorry. And a lot of great stuff happening. Who else would like to share?
It wasn't something that we talked about, but it's an interesting observation.
Going off the grid, I love it.
Yeah, so University of Michigan built a robotics building.
Yep.
And as an interdisciplinary facility, bringing together all these groups, Robotics Institute, people from different departments. It was so successful from a collaboration standpoint that the college voted to make robotics a department, which is super exciting and a really unique program to offer for undergraduates. But it's interesting that it started as a goal of interdisciplinary research.
Oh, and
now
then
it's a department.
Huh.
So
That is really, it's sort of like be careful what you wish for. A theme becomes an interdisciplinary theme, then becomes a department. That's interesting.
it's they're in their first year with undergraduates. It's proving it's projected to be very successful. There's lots of students interested in it, so it's great. But this is something that can happen.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Like increasing specificity of programs is a great way to attract students and funding. So, kind of makes sense. Well, no presentation would be complete without the Tradeline 3, and we came up with these, thinking together about the great process, working together. And the first one was to really benchmark carefully, which maybe is stating the obvious, but when you're thinking about trends and when you're thinking about the quantitative benchmarking, who the peers are and how they're different or the same as you really has a big impact. And so, for instance, schools of engineering, do you have computer science within the school or not? You get a totally different take on things. So benchmark carefully, both quantitatively and qualitatively. Second, communication is really key. And obviously it's key in project management and all that great stuff, but it's key on understanding what you have, because a lot of times when you do a needs assessment, people ask for things that you actually have, they just don't know about it. So sometimes a deficit is a communication deficit, not a space deficit or a service deficit, but it's also an opportunity to more broadly communicate your impact, which is important for rankings, reputation. And finally, I think whenever you see your org chart hard-coded in space, with walls, that should be a red flag, because people change a lot faster than space in many ways. Sometimes they don't. We heard a little bit about that earlier. But the way that space used to be allocated is you were more or less mapping an org chart to space, to a floor plan. And now, as you think about more flexible ways of working, as you think about thematic work, there's a much looser fit. So I think one thing we learned is that these legacy policies and processes about allocating space can be a real constraint, and you don't have to have that one-to-one fit between the org chart and the floor plan. Well, I want to thank everybody for all your great time and insights and questions, and Abigail and Mike for great work on the project and connecting remotely. And happy to take, I'll be up here if people have other questions, and really appreciate your time and attention.